The longest a human being has ever managed to stay awake, officially recorded, mind you, was 11 whole days and 25 minutes. Can you imagine that? But here is what truly concerns this old scientist, and I hope you'll find this as intriguing as I do. We simply do not know if poor Randy Gardner, that brave 17-year-old who achieved this remarkable feat back in 1964, ever truly recovered from what he put his precious brain through. Now, in tonight's gentle journey together, we are going to explore not just the immediate effects of missing our sleep, but I'm so excited to share with you some truly wonderful discoveries about how our amazing immune system responds within just 24 hours, the fascinating ways our brilliant brains work to repair themselves when we rest, how our minds can create the most vivid experiences when sleep eludes us, and some remarkable new research about how our bodies heal and recover. This is Science for Sleep, my dear listeners, where we explore the absolute wonders of our universe in the most peaceful way imaginable, and I am your devoted sleepy scientist, here with the greatest joy to help you drift off to the most restful sleep while we discover some truly extraordinary science together. Before we begin tonight's wonderful adventure, if you find these cozy scientific explorations bring you joy and comfort, it would warm my heart tremendously if you could give us a gentle like and perhaps subscribe to join our growing family of curious dreamers. Your kindness truly helps me continue creating these soothing bedtime stories of science. And oh, how I would absolutely love to hear from each of you. Please do tell me in the comments where in this beautiful world you are listening from, what time it is in your corner of the earth, and if you feel like sharing, what is the most wonderfully strange dream you have ever experienced. I treasure every single comment and do my very best to reply to each one. Think of it as our own special scientific family gathering across the stars. Think of sleep deprivation as a grand experiment that, unfortunately, millions of people are conducting on themselves every single night, often without realizing the profound changes happening in their brains and bodies. It is an experiment with results that range from the merely uncomfortable to the genuinely terrifying, from the reversible to the potentially permanent. Tonight, we will discover together how quickly things can go wrong when sleep disappears from our lives. We will explore the delicate mechanisms that keep our minds sharp and our bodies healthy, and what happens when those mechanisms begin to break down. We will meet the proteins that protect our memories, the hormones that control our appetite, and the immune cells that guard against disease, all of which depend on sleep in ways that science is only beginning to understand. Our journey will take us from the immediate effects, what happens in just the first 24 hours without sleep, to the long-term consequences that can last a lifetime. We will visit the laboratories where researchers study volunteers who stay awake for days, the hospitals where doctors see the real-world effects of chronic sleep loss, and the historical records that show us just how far the human mind can be pushed before it begins to fracture. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your breathing slow as we begin this exploration. Whether you drift off to sleep or stay awake for the entire journey, you will come away with a new appreciation for those 8 hours of rest your body craves every night. The first thing you need to understand about sleep deprivation is how quickly it begins to change you. Most people think they can handle a single sleepless night without much trouble. They imagine they will be tired the next day, perhaps a bit irritable, but fundamentally themselves. The science tells a very different story. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, staying awake for 24 hours impairs your cognitive function to the same degree as having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.1%. To put this in perspective, the legal limit for driving in most places is 0.08%. After just one night without sleep, you're essentially too impaired to safely operate a vehicle, even though you might feel relatively normal. But the comparison to alcohol intoxication, while useful, does not capture the full picture of what sleep deprivation does to your brain. Alcohol affects your motor coordination and judgment, but it does not systematically dismantle the cellular machinery that keeps your neurons healthy. Sleep deprivation does exactly that. Dr. Fuyi Xu and his colleagues at Binzhou Medical University made a remarkable discovery in 2023 when they studied mice that had been kept awake for 2 days. Using sophisticated protein analysis techniques, they found that sleep deprivation caused a dramatic decline in something called pleiotrophin, a protein that acts like a bodyguard for brain cells, particularly in the hippocampus, the brain region crucial for learning and memory. The hippocampus is shaped like a seahorse, curled deep within your temporal lobe, and it serves as something like the librarian of your brain, carefully filing away new experiences and connecting them to older memories. When pleiotrophin levels drop during sleep deprivation, as Dr. Xu discovered, hippocampal neurons begin to die. Not just become less efficient or temporarily impaired, but actually die. What makes this finding particularly unsettling is that when the researchers looked at human genetic studies, they found that pleiotrophin is also implicated in Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative conditions. This suggests that chronic sleep deprivation might not just make you tired, it might actually accelerate the kind of brain damage we associate with aging and dementia. The death of hippocampal neurons helps explain something that sleep researchers have observed for years. People who are sleep deprived have tremendous difficulty forming new memories. It is not that they cannot pay attention, though that is also impaired. It is that the very machinery of memory consolidation, the process by which short-term experiences become long-term memories, begins to break down. Think about that for a moment. Every night when you sleep, your brain is essentially performing a crucial backup process, taking the experiences of the day and carefully storing them in long-term memory. When you skip sleep, it is like repeatedly trying to save a document on a computer with a failing hard drive. Some of the information might get through, but much of it will be lost forever. Dr. Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley has spent years studying this process, and his research reveals something deeply troubling about sleep deprivation and memory. Not only do sleep-deprived people struggle to form new memories, they are also more likely to form false memories, confidently remembering things that never actually happened. In one of his studies, participants were shown a series of images and then asked to recall them after either a full night of sleep or a night of total sleep deprivation. Those who had slept normally could distinguish between images they had actually seen and similar images they had not. But the sleep-deprived participants were significantly more likely to claim they had seen images that were never shown to them. This finding has profound implications beyond the laboratory. It suggests that chronic sleep deprivation might not just impair your ability to learn new things, it might actually corrupt your existing memories, gradually replacing accurate recollections with false ones. In a sense, sleep deprivation does not just steal your future ability to remember, it can steal your past as well. The process happens at the cellular level through a complex dance of chemical signals. During normal sleep, particularly during the deep, slow-wave sleep phase, your brain produces specific patterns of electrical activity that help consolidate memories. These patterns, sometimes called sleep spindles because of their distinctive shape on brainwave recordings, coordinate the transfer of information from the hippocampus to the neocortex, where long-term memories are stored. When you deprive yourself of sleep, this consolidation process is disrupted. The memories that should be transferred to long-term storage instead fade away, like photographs left too long in sunlight. Worse, the hippocampus becomes increasingly unable to distinguish between real and imagined experiences, leading to the formation of those false memories that feel completely authentic. But the memory problems are just the beginning. After 24 hours without sleep, your brain begins to show signs of more widespread dysfunction. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, decision-making, and impulse control, starts to show decreased activity. This is why sleep-deprived people often make poor decisions and struggle with tasks that require planning or abstract reasoning. At the same time, the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes hyperactive. Dr. Sean Drummond at UC San Diego used functional magnetic resonance imaging to study the brains of sleep-deprived volunteers and found that their amygdala showed 60% more activity than normal when viewing emotional images. This hyperactivity helps explain why sleep deprivation often leads to emotional volatility, making people more reactive to stress and less able to regulate their emotions. The combination of an impaired prefrontal cortex and an overactive amygdala creates a perfect storm of poor judgment and emotional instability. It is as if the rational, thoughtful part of your brain goes offline, while the primitive, reactive part becomes hypervigilant. This neurological imbalance underlies many of the behavioral changes we see in sleep-deprived people: increased risk-taking, poor social judgment, and difficulty managing stress. Perhaps most concerning of all, these changes begin almost immediately. You do not need to stay awake for days to see significant impairment. Even a single night of poor sleep can measurably affect your cognitive performance the next day, and if you continue to restrict your sleep night after night, these effects compound, creating a snowball of cognitive decline that can be difficult to reverse. The research conducted by Dr. David Dinges at the University of Pennsylvania Sleep and Chronobiology Laboratory has shown that people who sleep just 4 hours per night for 6 consecutive nights perform as poorly on cognitive tests as people who have been completely deprived of sleep for up to 2 nights. This suggests that chronic partial sleep deprivation, the kind that many people experience in their daily lives, can be just as damaging as acute total sleep deprivation. What is particularly insidious about this process is that people often do not realize how impaired they have become. Dr. Dinges found that while objective measures of cognitive performance showed steady decline over days of sleep restriction, participants consistently rated their own alertness and performance as much better than it actually was. This phenomenon, known as the optimism bias of the sleep-deprived, means that people who most need sleep are often the least likely to recognize their own impairment. This disconnect between perceived and actual performance has serious real-world implications. The sleep-deprived surgeon who believes they're operating at full capacity, the parent who thinks they can safely drive their children to school despite being awake all night with a sick baby, the student who is confident they can ace an exam after pulling an all-nighter. In each case, the very brain systems needed to assess one's own competence have been compromised by sleep loss. As we move beyond that critical first 24-hour mark, the effects of sleep deprivation begin to cascade through multiple body systems. The brain, deprived of its nightly restoration, starts to show signs of more severe dysfunction. Connections between neurons become less efficient, communication between brain regions slows down, and the delicate balance of neurotransmitters that regulate mood, attention, and arousal begins to shift in dangerous directions. One of the most visible early signs of extended sleep deprivation is the emergence of microsleeps. These are brief, involuntary episodes of sleep that can last anywhere from a few seconds to 30 seconds. What makes microsleeps particularly dangerous is that they can occur even when a person appears to be awake and alert. Their eyes might remain open, they might even be engaged in conversation, but for those few seconds their brain has essentially gone offline. Dr. David Dinges, who has studied microsleeps extensively, describes them as periods during which the brain rapidly and uncontrollably enters a sleep state. During these episodes, people are essentially blind, even if their eyes are open. They're not processing visual information, they're not responding to sounds, and they're not making decisions. From the outside, it might look like they're simply daydreaming or momentarily distracted, but neurologically, they're asleep. The danger of microsleeps becomes immediately apparent when you consider their potential consequences. A microsleep that lasts just 4 or 5 seconds while driving at 55 miles per hour means travelling more than 100 yards completely unconscious. That is more than enough time to cross into oncoming traffic, miss a red light, or plough into the car ahead of you. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, drowsy driving is responsible for an estimated 91,000 police-reported crashes each year, leading to about 50,000 injuries and nearly 800 deaths. But experts believe these numbers significantly underestimate the true scope of the problem, since microsleeps often leave no obvious evidence and can be difficult to detect even after an accident occurs. The phenomenon of microsleeps reveals something profound about the nature of sleep itself. We tend to think of sleep and wakefulness as distinct states, like a light switch that is either on or off, but microsleeps show us that the boundary between sleeping and waking is much more fluid. Parts of your brain can be asleep while other parts remain awake, creating a dangerous hybrid state where you appear functional but are actually profoundly impaired. This partial sleep state becomes more frequent and longer lasting as sleep deprivation continues. After 36 hours without sleep, microsleeps become almost unavoidable. The brain's need for sleep becomes so overwhelming that it begins to steal moments of rest wherever it can find them, regardless of the circumstances or the potential consequences. But microsleeps are just one visible manifestation of the deeper changes occurring in the sleep-deprived brain. At the cellular level, neurons are struggling to maintain their normal functions without the restorative processes that occur during sleep. The synapses, the connection points between neurons, begin to show signs of stress and dysfunction. Recent research by Dr. Chiara Sorelli at the University of Wisconsin has revealed that during wakefulness, synapses grow larger and stronger as we learn and experience new things. This growth is essential for forming memories and adapting to new situations, but it comes at a cost. Larger synapses consume more energy and take up more space in the brain. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, many of these synapses are pruned back to a more manageable size, preserving the important connections while eliminating the unnecessary ones. This synaptic homeostasis, or Dr. Sorelli calls it, is crucial for maintaining optimal brain function. Without the pruning that occurs during sleep, synapses continue to grow larger and more energy demanding. The brain becomes like a garden that has never been weeded, overgrown and inefficient. Neural signals become less precise, processing speed slows down, and the brain struggles to distinguish between important and unimportant information. The consequences of disrupted synaptic homeostasis extend far beyond simple fatigue or cognitive sluggishness. As synapses become oversized and inefficient, the brain's ability to form new memories deteriorates. Existing memories may become unstable or corrupted. The very neural networks that define who you are, your personality, your skills, your accumulated knowledge and experience, begin to function less reliably. Dr. Sorelli's research has shown that chronic sleep restriction in laboratory animals leads to a loss of connectivity in key brain regions, particularly in areas involved in attention and executive function. These changes can persist even after sleep is restored, suggesting that some of the damage caused by chronic sleep deprivation might be permanent. This possibility, that sleep deprivation could cause lasting changes to the brain, represents a fundamental shift in how we think about sleep loss. For decades, scientists and the general public alike viewed sleep deprivation as a temporary problem. Get some sleep and you would bounce back to normal, but mounting evidence suggests that this recovery model may be overly optimistic, especially when it comes to chronic sleep restriction. Studies of shift workers, who often experience years of disrupted sleep schedules, provide some of the most compelling evidence for permanent effects of sleep deprivation. Research conducted by Dr. Torbjörn Ackerstedt at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden has followed shift workers for decades, tracking changes in their cognitive function, health, and mortality rates. What Dr. Ackerstedt and his colleagues have found is deeply troubling. Even after shift workers retire and return to normal sleep schedules, many continue to show signs of cognitive impairment. Their reaction times remain slower, their memory formation less efficient, and their ability to maintain attention more limited than people who maintained regular sleep schedules throughout their careers. These findings suggest that the brain has a kind of sleep debt that cannot be fully repaid. While acute sleep deprivation can often be recovered from with adequate rest, chronic sleep restriction appears to cause cumulative damage that persists even after normal sleep is restored. The mechanisms underlying this permanent damage are only beginning to be understood. One leading theory involves the accumulation of toxic proteins in the brain during periods of sleep loss. During normal sleep, the brain's glymphatic system, a kind of waste removal network discovered by Dr. Maiken Nedergaard at the University of Rochester, becomes highly active, flushing out metabolic waste products that accumulate during wakefulness. This glymphatic system works like a dishwasher for the brain, using cerebrospinal fluid to wash away the cellular debris that builds up during normal neural activity. One of the most important waste products it removes is beta amyloid, a protein that forms the characteristic plaques found in Alzheimer's disease. When sleep is restricted, the glymphatic system cannot function properly. Waste products, including beta amyloid, begin to accumulate in brain tissue. Over time, this accumulation may contribute to neurodegeneration and cognitive decline, creating a direct link between sleep deprivation and dementia risk. Dr. Nedergaard's research has shown that even a single night of sleep deprivation can increase beta amyloid levels in the human brain by 5%. While this might seem like a small change, Consider that most people experience poor sleep not just occasionally but regularly. The cumulative effect of these small increases, night after night, year after year, could be substantial. This connection between sleep loss and brain health has profound implications for our understanding of neurodegenerative diseases. It suggests that chronic sleep deprivation might not just be a symptom or consequence of conditions like Alzheimer's disease, but actually a contributing cause. The lifestyle factors that disrupt sleep, stress, irregular schedules, poor sleep hygiene might be directly accelerating the aging process in our brains. As sleep deprivation extends beyond the first day, these cellular and molecular changes begin to manifest in increasingly obvious ways. The mild cognitive impairment of the first 24 hours gives way to more severe symptoms. Reaction times become significantly slower, making even simple tasks feel difficult. Attention becomes increasingly difficult to maintain, with the mind wandering even during important conversations or activities. Language processing, typically one of our most automatic cognitive functions, begins to show signs of strain. Sleep-deprived people often struggle to find the right words, speak more slowly, and have difficulty following complex verbal instructions. Their speech patterns may become more monotone and less expressive, reflecting the broader emotional flattening that accompanies severe sleep loss. Visual processing also becomes impaired in distinctive ways. People may begin to experience visual distortions, seeing movement in their peripheral vision, or noticing that stationary objects appear to shimmer or move slightly. These are not full hallucinations yet, but rather signs that the visual processing centers of the brain are beginning to function abnormally. The boundary between perception and imagination starts to blur. Sleep-deprived individuals may become unsure whether they actually heard a sound or just imagined it, whether they saw someone approach or if it was just a shadow. This uncertainty reflects the breakdown of the normal mechanisms that help us distinguish between internal thoughts and external reality. Dr. Francesca Waters at the University of Western Australia has conducted extensive research on the perceptual changes that occur during sleep deprivation. Her systematic review of historical sleep deprivation studies, published in Frontiers in Psychiatry, revealed a remarkably consistent pattern of symptoms that develop as sleep loss continues. According to Dr. Waters' research, perceptual distortions typically begin within 24 to 48 hours of sleep loss. Visual distortions are by far the most common, occurring in 90% of the studies she reviewed. These might include seeing patterns or movement that are not really there, or having difficulty judging distances and spatial relationships. Somatosensory changes, alterations in how touch and bodily sensations are perceived, occur in about 52% of cases. People might feel as though their skin is crawling, experience numbness or tingling in their extremities, or have difficulty judging the position of their body in space. Auditory changes are less common but still significant, occurring in about 33% of cases. These might include hearing sounds that are not there, having difficulty distinguishing between different voices, or becoming hypersensitive to normal environmental sounds. What Dr. Waters found most interesting was how predictable and progressive these symptoms are. They do not appear randomly or vary dramatically from person to person. Instead, they follow an almost fixed, time-dependent sequence, suggesting that sleep deprivation affects specific brain systems in a highly systematic way. This predictability has important implications for understanding both the function of sleep and the consequences of sleep loss. It suggests that the brain systems disrupted by sleep deprivation are not random, but rather represent the most sleep-dependent aspects of neural function. By studying what fails first during sleep loss, researchers can gain insights into what sleep is designed to protect and restore. The progression that Dr. Waters documented moves from simple perceptual distortions to more complex hallucinations and eventually to frank psychosis. This timeline provides a kind of roadmap for understanding how sleep deprivation gradually dismantles normal brain function, starting with the most basic perceptual processes and eventually affecting higher-order cognitive abilities like reasoning and judgment and reality testing. As we approach the 48-hour mark of continuous wakefulness, these perceptual changes begin to accelerate and intensify. What started as mild visual distortions may develop into more complex and persistent hallucinations. The microsleeps that began as brief lapses become longer and more frequent, sometimes lasting up to 30 seconds or more. The subjective experience of being awake for this long becomes increasingly surreal. Many people describe feeling as though they are living in a dream, where the boundaries between thought and perception, between internal and external experience, become increasingly unclear. The familiar world begins to feel strange and unfamiliar, as if seen through a distorting lens. Dr. Dingnes describes this state as one in which the normal architecture of consciousness begins to break down. The various brain networks that typically coordinate to produce coherent, integrated experience start to function independently, creating a fragmentary and often confusing subjective experience. This breakdown in the normal coordination of brain networks may explain why sleep deprivation sometimes produces creative insights alongside cognitive impairment. When the usual constraints on thinking are relaxed, novel connections and associations may emerge. Many artists and writers have noted that exhaustion sometimes leads to unexpected creative breakthroughs, though at the cost of general cognitive competence. However, these brief moments of creative insight are far outweighed by the overall degradation in mental function. As sleep deprivation continues beyond 48 hours, the symptoms become increasingly severe and potentially dangerous. The stage is set for even more dramatic changes in both brain function and behavior, changes that can have lasting consequences for both the individual and those around them. The progression from mild impairment to severe dysfunction follows a predictable but frightening trajectory. What begins as simple tiredness and occasional lapses in attention gradually transforms into a state that can closely resemble serious psychiatric illness. Understanding this progression is crucial not just for scientific knowledge, but for recognizing the real dangers that prolonged sleep deprivation poses to individuals and society. We are still only at the beginning of our journey through the landscape of sleep deprivation, and already we can see how quickly and systematically the brain begins to fail when deprived of its most basic need. As we continue deeper into this exploration, we will discover how these neural changes cascade through every system of the body, creating a complex web of dysfunction that touches everything from immune function to emotional regulation to basic survival instincts. But even as we explore these darker territories, remember that this knowledge serves a purpose beyond mere academic curiosity. By understanding what happens when we do not sleep, we gain a deeper appreciation for the miraculous restoration that occurs every night when we do. We come to see sleep not as time lost or wasted, but as perhaps the most important thing we do for our health, our minds, and our very humanity. The immune system, that intricate network of cells and proteins that guards against infection and disease, depends on sleep in ways that scientists are only beginning to appreciate. When sleep disappears, this defensive fortress begins to crumble with alarming speed, leaving the body vulnerable to threats both external and internal. The relationship between sleep and immune function was first seriously studied in the 1970s, when researchers noticed that people who worked night shifts seemed to get sick more often than those who maintained regular sleep schedules. But it was not until the development of more sophisticated techniques for measuring immune function that scientists began to understand just how profound this relationship really is. Dr. Alexandros Gontzas at Penn State University conducted one of the most revealing studies of sleep deprivation and immune function in the early 2000s. He and his colleagues recruited healthy volunteers and restricted their sleep to just 4 hours per night for a single night, then measured various markers of immune function in their blood. What they found was startling. After just one night of partial sleep deprivation, the activity of natural killer cells, specialized immune cells that hunt down and destroy infected or cancerous cells, dropped by an average of 72%. To put this in perspective, imagine if 3/4 of your body's tumor surveillance system suddenly went offline. That is essentially what happens when you lose sleep, even for a single night. Natural killer cells, or NK cells as they're commonly known, represent one of your immune system's most important defenses against cancer. They patrol your body constantly, identifying and eliminating cells that have become cancerous or infected with viruses. The fact that their activity plummets so dramatically with sleep loss has profound implications for long-term health. A long-term study conducted in Japan followed over 4,000 people for 11 years, tracking both their sleep habits and their cancer rates. The researchers found that people with reduced NK cell function had a 1.6 times higher risk of dying from cancer during the follow-up period. While the study did not directly measure sleep deprivation, other research has established the clear connection between sleep loss and reduced NK cell activity. The immune system disruption caused by sleep deprivation extends far beyond NK cells. Dr. Luciana Besedowski at the University of Tübingen has studied how sleep affects the formation of immunological memory, the process by which your immune system remembers previous infections and can respond more quickly if they recur. When Dr. Besedowski and her colleagues gave hepatitis A vaccinations to volunteers who had either slept normally or been kept awake the night after vaccination, they found dramatic differences in antibody production. Those who slept normally after vaccination produced more than twice as many antibodies as those who were sleep-deprived. Even more concerning, this difference persisted for months, suggesting that sleep deprivation can create long-lasting gaps in immune protection. This finding has practical implications that extend far beyond the laboratory. It suggests that people who are chronically sleep-deprived may not develop full immunity even when they receive vaccines. In an era of global infectious disease threats, this represents a significant public health concern. The mechanisms by which sleep deprivation undermines immune function are complex and involve multiple pathways. During normal sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, your body increases production of several hormones that support immune function, including growth hormone and prolactin. Sleep deprivation disrupts this hormonal cascade, reducing the availability of these immune-supporting signals. At the same time, sleep loss increases levels of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. While these hormones can be helpful in acute stress situations, chronic elevation suppresses immune function and increases inflammation throughout the body. Dr. Michael Irwin at UCLA has shown that even modest sleep restriction can trigger inflammatory responses similar to those seen during serious illness or injury. This chronic inflammation represents one of the most insidious consequences of sleep deprivation. Unlike the acute inflammation that occurs when you cut your finger or catch a cold, which serves a protective function and then resolves, chronic inflammation persists over time and can damage healthy tissues. The inflammatory changes caused by sleep deprivation affect virtually every organ system in the body. In the cardiovascular system, chronic inflammation contributes to the development of atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaques in arteries that can lead to heart attacks and strokes. Sleep-deprived people have higher levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, both of which are associated with increased cardiovascular disease risk. Dr. Francesco Capuccio at the University of Warwick conducted a meta-analysis of studies involving over 1 million participants and found that people who sleep less than 6 hours per night have a 48% increased risk of developing or dying from coronary heart disease and a 15% increased risk of stroke. The immune dysfunction caused by sleep deprivation also affects the body's ability to fight off infections. Multiple studies have shown that sleep-deprived people are more likely to catch colds when exposed to rhinoviruses, more likely to develop complications from bacterial infections, and more likely to experience severe symptoms when they do get sick. Dr. Eric Prather at UC San Francisco conducted a particularly clever study of this phenomenon. He recruited healthy volunteers, measured their sleep duration using wearable monitors, and then deliberately exposed them to rhinovirus, the virus that causes the common cold. People who slept less than 5 hours per night were 3 times more likely to develop cold symptoms than those who slept 7 hours or more. What makes this finding particularly interesting is that it controlled for many other factors that might influence infection risk, including stress levels, age, exercise habits, and alcohol consumption. The relationship between sleep duration and infection risk remains strong even after accounting for these variables, suggesting that sleep itself plays a direct role in immune defense. The timing of sleep also matters for immune function. Shift workers, who often sleep during the day when their circadian rhythms are programmed for wakefulness, show particularly severe immune dysfunction. Their antibody responses to vaccines are reduced, their infection rates are higher, and their levels of inflammatory markers remain chronically elevated. Dr. Eva Schönhammer at Harvard Medical School has conducted extensive research on shift workers and found that women who work rotating night shifts for more than 6 years have a significantly increased risk of developing breast cancer. While the mechanisms underlying this increased cancer risk are still being studied, disrupted sleep and circadian rhythms appear to play a central role. The immune changes caused by sleep deprivation can become self-perpetuating. When immune function is compromised, people get sick more often. When they are sick, they often sleep poorly, which further impairs immune function and prolongs recovery. This creates a vicious cycle that can be difficult to break without deliberate intervention. Children are particularly vulnerable to the immune effects of sleep deprivation. Dr. Yuli Lemeng at the University of Michigan has shown that children who do not get adequate sleep have higher rates of respiratory infections, ear infections, and other common childhood illnesses. These children also show reduced antibody responses to routine childhood vaccines, potentially leaving them vulnerable to preventable diseases. The relationship between sleep and immune function extends beyond fighting infections and cancer. Sleep also plays a crucial role in regulating autoimmune diseases, conditions where the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues. Dr. Maurizio Zuccotti at the University of Pavia has found that sleep disruption can trigger flares of autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and inflammatory bowel disease. The mechanisms behind this connection involve the balance between different types of immune cells. During normal sleep, the immune system maintains a careful equilibrium between pro-inflammatory cells that attack threats and anti-inflammatory cells that calm the immune response once threats are eliminated. Sleep deprivation disrupts this balance, creating a state of chronic immune activation that can turn against healthy tissues. Perhaps most remarkably, recent research has revealed that sleep deprivation can actually alter the expression of genes involved in immune function. Dr. Nathaniel Watson at the University of Washington studied identical twins who had different sleep patterns and found that the twin who slept less had altered activity in genes related to immune response, metabolism, and stress response. This finding suggests that chronic sleep deprivation does not just temporarily impair immune function, it may actually reprogram the immune system at the genetic level. The shorter sleeping twin showed increased expression of genes associated with inflammation and decreased expression of genes involved in immune surveillance and tumor suppression. The twin study is particularly powerful because identical twins share the same genetic blueprint. Any differences in gene expression between them must be due to environmental factors, in this case, differences in sleep duration. The fact that sleep alone was sufficient to alter gene expression patterns highlights just how fundamental sleep is to basic cellular function. These genetic changes may help explain why the health effects of chronic sleep deprivation can persist even after sleep patterns improve. If sleep loss actually alters which genes are turned on and off in immune cells, it may take considerable time for normal gene expression patterns to be restored, if they can be restored at all. The immune consequences of sleep deprivation extend beyond individual health to broader public health concerns. During the 2009 H1N1 influenza pandemic, researchers noticed that healthcare workers who were chronically sleep deprived were more likely to become infected despite having access to personal protective equipment and antiviral medications. Similarly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, studies found that people with poor sleep quality were more likely to contract SARS-CoV-2 and more likely to experience severe symptoms if they did become infected. This relationship held true even after controlling for other risk factors like age, underlying health conditions, and socioeconomic status. Dr. Eva Morin at Maastricht University conducted a large-scale study of over 12,000 healthcare workers and found that those who reported poor sleep quality had a 70% higher risk of catching influenza during flu season. This finding has important implications for healthcare systems that rely on staff working long hours and irregular schedules. The bidirectional relationship between sleep and immune function creates particular challenges during times of illness. When people are sick, they often experience fragmented sleep due to symptoms like cough, fever, or pain. This poor sleep quality impairs immune function just when the body needs it most, potentially prolonging illness and increasing the risk of complications. Understanding this relationship has led to new approaches to treating infectious diseases that incorporate sleep hygiene as a component of therapy. Some hospitals now implement protocols to minimize sleep disruption in patients, recognizing that good sleep is not just a comfort issue but an active component of healing. The effects of sleep deprivation on immune function are not limited to fighting infections and cancer. The immune system also plays important roles in wound healing, tissue repair, and maintaining the health of organs throughout the body. When immune function is compromised by sleep loss, these processes slow down significantly. Dr. Kimberly Moffitt at the University of Tennessee studied wound healing in sleep-deprived mice and found that cuts took significantly longer to heal when animals were kept awake. The cellular mechanisms of repair, including the migration of immune cells to wound sites and the production of growth factors that stimulate tissue regeneration, were all impaired by sleep loss. This finding has practical implications for surgical recovery. Patients who experience poor sleep after surgery may heal more slowly and have higher rates of complications. Some surgical centers now incorporate sleep optimization into their pre- and post-operative protocols, recognizing that good sleep can directly impact surgical outcomes. The relationship between sleep and immune function also helps explain why sleep deprivation is associated with accelerated aging. Many of the cellular and molecular changes associated with aging involve immune system dysfunction and chronic inflammation. By disrupting immune function and promoting inflammation, chronic sleep loss may essentially accelerate the aging process at the cellular level. Dr. Steve Cole at UCLA has developed techniques for measuring biological age based on gene expression patterns in immune cells. His research has shown that people with chronic sleep problems have gene expression profiles that suggest they are biologically older than their chronological age would indicate. This biological age acceleration may contribute to the increased mortality risk associated with chronic sleep deprivation. Multiple large-scale epidemiological studies have found that people who consistently sleep less than 6 hours per night have higher death rates from all causes, even after controlling for other health behaviors and medical conditions. The immune effects of sleep deprivation create a complex web of interconnected health problems. Poor sleep leads to immune dysfunction, which increases infection risk and promotes chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation contributes to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and neurodegenerative conditions. These conditions, in turn, often disrupt sleep quality, creating a vicious cycle of declining health. Breaking this cycle requires understanding that sleep is not a luxury or a sign of laziness, but a fundamental biological necessity. The immune system, like every other system in the body, depends on the restoration and repair processes that occur during sleep. Without adequate sleep, immune function gradually deteriorates, leaving the body vulnerable to a wide range of health threats. As we move deeper into the consequences of sleep deprivation, we encounter perhaps one of the most immediately noticeable and practically important effects: the complete disruption of the body's metabolic systems. When sleep disappears, the elegant hormonal dance that regulates hunger, satiety, and energy storage becomes a chaotic free for all that can lead to rapid weight gain and long-term metabolic disease. The discovery that sleep directly affects body weight came as a surprise to many researchers. For decades, obesity was understood primarily in terms of calories in versus calories out, with little attention paid to when or how well people slept. But beginning in the late 1990s, epidemiological studies began to reveal a consistent and troubling pattern. People who slept less weighed more. Dr. Sanjay Patel at Case Western Reserve University was among the first to document this relationship systematically. In a study of over 18,000 adults, he found that people who slept 5 hours or less per night were 32% more likely to experience major weight gain over time compared to those who slept 7 to 9 hours. This finding was initially met with skepticism. Perhaps, critics suggested, people who slept less simply had more opportunities to eat, staying up late and consuming extra calories. Or maybe the relationship was reversed. Perhaps weight gain caused sleep problems rather than the other way around. But controlled laboratory studies soon provided compelling evidence that sleep deprivation directly causes changes in appetite and metabolism. Dr. Corinne Spiegel at the University of Chicago conducted one of the most influential of these studies. bringing healthy volunteers into a sleep laboratory and carefully controlling both their sleep duration and their food intake. When participants slept only 4 hours per night for 2 nights, Dr. Spiegel observed dramatic changes in hormones that regulate appetite. Levels of leptin, a hormone produced by fat cells that signals satiety and reduces appetite, dropped by 18%. At the same time, levels of ghrelin, a hormone produced by the stomach that stimulates appetite, increased by 28%. The combination of reduced leptin and increased ghrelin created a powerful drive to eat. Participants reported feeling hungrier than usual and showed increased cravings for high-calorie, high-carbohydrate foods. When given the opportunity to eat freely, they consumed an average of 350 more calories per day compared to when they were well rested. Think about that for a moment. A single night of poor sleep was sufficient to alter fundamental hormonal signals that control appetite and increase caloric intake by nearly 20%. If sustained over time, this level of increased consumption would lead to substantial weight gain. The hormonal changes caused by sleep deprivation extend far beyond leptin and ghrelin. Dr. Plamen Penev, also at the University of Chicago, has shown that sleep restriction affects dozens of hormones involved in metabolism, including insulin, cortisol, growth hormone, and thyroid hormones. Insulin, the hormone that regulates blood sugar levels, becomes less effective when sleep is restricted. Dr. Penev found that just 4 nights of sleeping 4 hours reduced insulin sensitivity by more than 30%, a change similar to that seen in prediabetes. This insulin resistance makes it harder for cells to take up glucose from the bloodstream, leading to higher blood sugar levels and increased fat storage. The effects on insulin sensitivity occur remarkably quickly. Dr. Josiane Broussard at the University of Colorado found that even a single night of sleep restriction can reduce insulin sensitivity by up to 25% in healthy young adults. This rapid onset suggests that the metabolic consequences of poor sleep are not just cumulative but can occur immediately. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, also becomes dysregulated with sleep loss. Normal cortisol patterns follow a circadian rhythm, rising in the morning to help you wake up and gradually declining throughout the day to prepare for sleep. Sleep deprivation disrupts this pattern, leading to elevated cortisol levels at inappropriate times. Chronically elevated cortisol promotes weight gain, particularly in the abdominal area, and contributes to insulin resistance. It also increases appetite and cravings for high-calorie comfort foods. The combination of hormonal changes triggered by sleep loss creates what researchers call a perfect storm for weight gain and metabolic dysfunction. Growth hormone, which is normally released in large pulses during deep sleep, is dramatically reduced when sleep is restricted. This hormone plays important roles in metabolism, tissue repair, and maintaining lean muscle mass. Reduced growth hormone secretion may contribute to the loss of muscle mass and the preferential storage of calories as fat that occurs with chronic sleep deprivation. The metabolic consequences of sleep loss are not just about eating more calories. Sleep deprivation also appears to change how the body processes and stores the calories that are consumed. Dr. Matthew Brady at the University of Chicago studied fat cells, called adipocytes, from sleep-restricted volunteers and found that these cells became less responsive to insulin. This cellular-level insulin resistance means that when sleep-deprived people eat, their bodies are less efficient at storing calories in fat cells and more likely to convert excess calories to fat rather than using them for energy or other cellular processes. In essence, sleep deprivation programs the body to gain weight even when caloric intake remains constant. The food preferences that emerge during sleep deprivation also contribute to weight gain. Dr. Stephanie Greer at UC Berkeley used brain imaging to study how sleep deprivation affects food choices. She found that sleep-deprived participants showed increased activity in brain regions associated with reward and pleasure when viewing images of high-calorie foods like pizza, donuts, and ice cream. At the same time, sleep deprivation reduced activity in the frontal cortex, the brain region responsible for impulse control and rational decision-making. This combination of increased reward signaling and decreased impulse control creates a neurobiological drive toward unhealthy food choices. The changes in brain activity help explain why sleep-deprived people often crave what researchers call hedonic foods. items that are high in calories, sugar, and fat but low in nutritional value. These foods trigger strong reward responses in the brain, providing temporary pleasure that may help compensate for the stress and discomfort of sleep deprivation. Dr. Susan Carnell at Johns Hopkins has found that children show similar patterns, with sleep-deprived kids preferring sugary snacks and showing less interest in healthy foods like fruits and vegetables. This suggests that the relationship between sleep and food preferences is fundamental and not just a product of adult lifestyle factors. The timing of eating also becomes disrupted with sleep loss. People who stay up late often engage in what researchers call night eating syndrome, consuming a significant portion of their daily calories during evening and nighttime hours when metabolism is naturally slower. Dr. Kelly Allison at the University of Pennsylvania has studied night eating extensively and found that calories consumed late at night are more likely to be stored as fat compared to calories consumed earlier in the day. This is partly due to circadian rhythms in metabolism that optimize the body for energy storage, rather than energy expenditure during nighttime hours. The combination of altered appetite hormones, changed food preferences, disrupted meal timing, and reduced metabolic efficiency creates a powerful drive toward weight gain in sleep-deprived individuals. But the consequences extend beyond simple weight gain to include increased risk of serious metabolic diseases. Type 2 diabetes risk is dramatically increased by chronic sleep deprivation. Dr. Gottfried Leibniz at Harvard Medical School analyzed data from over 100,000 people followed for up to 20 years and found that people who slept 5 hours or less per night had a 2.5-fold increased risk of developing diabetes. The relationship between sleep and diabetes risk appears to be causal rather than simply correlational. The insulin resistance that develops within days of sleep restriction is a key step in the development of type 2 diabetes. When cells become less responsive to insulin, the pancreas must produce more insulin to maintain normal blood sugar levels. Over time, this increased demand can exhaust the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas, leading to diabetes. Sleep deprivation also affects the liver's ability to regulate glucose production. During normal sleep, the liver reduces its production of glucose, helping to maintain stable blood sugar levels throughout the night. When sleep is disrupted, the liver continues to produce glucose inappropriately, contributing to elevated blood sugar levels. Dr. Pamela Lutzy at the University of Minnesota has shown that even modest reductions in sleep duration can have metabolic consequences. In her study of over 3,000 adults, people who slept 6 hours per night had significantly higher rates of prediabetes compared to those who slept 7 to 8 hours. The metabolic effects of sleep deprivation are not limited to glucose and insulin. Sleep loss also affects lipid metabolism, altering how the body processes fats and cholesterol. Dr. Kristen Knutson at Northwestern University has found that people who sleep less than 6 hours per night have higher levels of triglycerides and lower levels of HDL or good cholesterol. These lipid changes contribute to cardiovascular disease risk, and may help explain why chronic sleep deprivation is associated with increased rates of heart disease and stroke. The metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions including obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and abnormal cholesterol levels, is significantly more common in people with chronic sleep problems. The appetite and weight gain effects of sleep deprivation can be particularly pronounced in shift workers, whose sleep schedules are chronically disrupted. Dr. Frank Scheer at Harvard Medical School has found that night shift workers gain weight more rapidly than day workers, even when their total caloric intake is similar. This weight gain appears to be related to the mismatch between when shift workers eat and their circadian rhythms. Eating during nighttime hours, when the body is programmed for sleep rather than digestion, may lead to less efficient metabolism and greater fat storage. The metabolic consequences of sleep deprivation create yet another vicious cycle. Sleep loss leads to weight gain and metabolic dysfunction, which can worsen sleep quality through conditions like sleep apnea, restless legs syndrome, and increased nighttime awakenings. Poor sleep quality then perpetuates the metabolic problems, creating a self-reinforcing pattern that can be difficult to break. Recovery from the metabolic effects of sleep deprivation is possible but may take considerable time. Dr. Christopher Deppner at the University of Colorado found that even weekend recovery sleep, while helpful, was not sufficient to completely restore normal metabolism after a week of sleep restriction. full recovery appeared to require sustained periods of adequate sleep over multiple weeks. The speed and severity of metabolic disruption caused by sleep loss highlight just how fundamental sleep is to basic physiological function. The systems that regulate energy intake, storage, and expenditure are not just influenced by sleep, they are directly dependent on it. When sleep fails, these systems quickly spiral out of control, creating health consequences that can persist long after normal sleep is restored. As sleep deprivation continues beyond the initial metabolic disruption, the body's attempts to cope with chronic sleep loss lead to even more dramatic and potentially dangerous symptoms. The boundary between normal waking consciousness and sleep begins to blur in ways that fundamentally alter perception and cognition. After 48 hours of continuous wakefulness, most people begin to experience what sleep researchers call hypnagogic hallucinations, vivid perceptual experiences that occur at the boundary between waking and sleeping. These are different from the simple visual distortions that may appear earlier. They are complex, often realistic seeming experiences that can involve any of the senses. Dr. Francesca Waters' systematic review of historical sleep deprivation studies found that 90% of people experience visual hallucinations by this point, but the nature of these experiences varies considerably. Some people see geometric patterns or flashing lights, while others perceive complex scenes with people, animals, or objects that are not actually present. The visual hallucinations often begin in peripheral vision, where movement or shadow-like shapes appear in the corners of the visual field. As sleep deprivation continues, these experiences become more central and more complex. People may see insects crawling on surfaces, faces appearing in patterns on walls, or entire scenes playing out like brief movies. What makes these hallucinations particularly unsettling is how realistic they can seem. Unlike the obviously dreamlike quality of experiences during actual sleep, hypnagogic hallucinations can be difficult to distinguish from reality, especially in the moment they occur. People may only realize they were hallucinating after the experience has passed, and they notice that others did not see or hear what they experienced. Dr. Stephen Potkin at UC Irvine has used brain imaging to study what happens in the brain during these hallucinations. He found that during hypnagogic experiences, parts of the visual cortex become active even when the eyes are closed, suggesting that the brain is generating visual experiences internally rather than processing actual visual input. The hallucinations are not random, but often have distinctive characteristics. Many people report seeing small animals, particularly insects or rodents, that appear to move quickly across surfaces. Others see human figures, often shadowy or indistinct, that appear and disappear rapidly. Some experience what researchers call presence hallucinations, the strong feeling that someone else is in the room even when they are alone. Auditory hallucinations typically develop later than visual ones, but can be equally compelling. People may hear voices calling their name, conversations in adjacent rooms, or music playing faintly in the distance. Unlike the auditory hallucinations associated with psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia, those caused by sleep deprivation are usually brief and occur against a background of awareness that they are not real. Tactile hallucinations, involving the sense of touch, are less common but can be particularly disturbing when they occur. People may feel insects crawling on their skin, temperature changes that others do not experience, or the sensation of being touched by invisible hands. These experiences can be so convincing that people may brush at their skin or look around for the source of the sensation. The timing and content of hallucinations provide important clues about their underlying mechanisms. Dr. Jerome Siegel at UCLA has proposed that hallucinations during sleep deprivation represent intrusion of REM sleep phenomena into waking consciousness. During normal REM sleep, the brain generates vivid dream experiences while simultaneously suppressing motor output to prevent people from acting out their dreams. When severe sleep deprivation occurs, this system may begin to malfunction, allowing dreamlike experiences to occur during apparent wakefulness. This would explain why sleep deprivation hallucinations often have the bizarre, rapidly changing quality of dreams, and why they tend to occur more frequently when people are quiet and unstimulated. The development of hallucinations marks a critical threshold in sleep deprivation. Up to this point, the symptoms, while serious, primarily affect cognitive performance and physical comfort. Hallucinations represent a qualitative change in consciousness itself, a breakdown in the basic mechanisms that distinguish between internal mental events and external reality. Accompanying the hallucinations are increasingly frequent and prolonged micro-sleep episodes. What began as brief lapses lasting a few seconds now extend to 30 seconds or more. During these episodes, people may appear to be staring blankly into space, their eyes open but completely unresponsive to their surroundings. Dr. Thomas Roth at the Sleep Disorders Center in Detroit has studied microsleeps extensively and found that they become virtually unavoidable after 48 hours of sleep deprivation. The brain's need for sleep becomes so overwhelming that it begins to seize moments of rest, whether the person consciously allows it or not. These extended microsleeps are extremely dangerous in any situation requiring attention or responsiveness. A 30-second microsleep while driving at highway speeds means travelling more than half a mile completely unconscious. Even in seemingly safe situations, like sitting in a chair or walking downstairs, prolonged microsleeps can lead to falls and injuries. The subjective experience of these extended microsleeps is often described as deeply disorienting. People may suddenly find themselves in a different location with no memory of how they got there, or discover that several minutes have passed without their awareness. The smooth continuity of conscious experience begins to fragment into disconnected episodes. As sleep deprivation approaches the 72-hour mark, the symptoms become increasingly severe and begin to resemble serious psychiatric conditions. Dr. Jim Horn at Loughborough University has documented cases where sleep-deprived individuals developed what appeared to be acute psychotic episodes, complete with paranoid delusions and severely impaired reality testing. The delusions that emerge during extreme sleep deprivation often have paranoid themes. People may become convinced that they are being watched or followed, that their food is being poisoned, or that electronic devices are being used to monitor their thoughts. These beliefs can be held with complete conviction, even in the face of contradictory evidence. What distinguishes sleep deprivation-induced psychosis from other forms of psychotic illness is its direct relationship to sleep loss and its rapid resolution once adequate sleep is restored. People who develop paranoid delusions after 3 days without sleep typically return to normal mental function within a day or two of recovery sleep, with little or no memory of their psychotic experiences. The progression from mild perceptual distortions to frank psychosis follows a predictable timeline that has been documented in multiple studies. Dr. Waters' analysis found that perceptual distortions and anxiety typically begin within 24 to 48 hours. Complex hallucinations develop after 48 to 90 hours, and delusions usually appear after 72 hours of continuous wakefulness. This timeline suggests that sleep deprivation affects different brain systems in a hierarchical manner, starting with basic perceptual processing and gradually affecting higher-order cognitive functions like reasoning and reality testing. The most fundamental and evolutionarily ancient brain functions appear to be most resilient to sleep loss, while more recent and complex cognitive abilities fail first. The development of psychotic symptoms during sleep deprivation has important implications for understanding both the function of sleep and the nature of psychiatric illness. It suggests that some symptoms we associate with mental illness may actually reflect disruption of basic biological processes rather than permanent alterations in brain structure or chemistry. The resemblance between sleep deprivation psychosis and conditions like schizophrenia has led some researchers to propose that sleep disturbances may play a role in the development of psychiatric disorders. Dr. Russell Foster at Oxford University has noted that sleep problems often precede the onset of psychiatric symptoms, and that improving sleep quality can sometimes reduce the severity of mental health conditions. The dramatic mental changes that occur during extreme sleep deprivation also highlight the crucial role that sleep plays in maintaining normal consciousness. The coherent, integrated experience of being awake and aware depends on multiple brain systems working in coordination, and this coordination requires the restoration and synchronization that occur during sleep. When sleep is absent for too long, this coordination begins to break down. Different brain regions begin to function independently, creating a fragmentary and often frightening subjective experience. The familiar sense of being a unified self-aware individual gradually dissolves into a collection of disconnected perceptions, thoughts, and sensations. The recovery from extreme sleep deprivation can be as remarkable as the deterioration itself. Most people who experience hallucinations and delusions due to sleep loss recover completely once they get adequate sleep, often within 24 to 48 hours. This rapid recovery suggests that the brain changes caused by sleep deprivation are largely functional rather than structural. However, the experience of losing touch with reality, even temporarily, can have lasting psychological effects. Many people who have experienced severe sleep deprivation report feeling shaken by the realization of how quickly and dramatically their mental function deteriorated. The experience serves as a powerful reminder of how dependent normal consciousness is on adequate sleep. The hallucinations and microsleeps that characterize severe sleep deprivation represent a breakdown in the most fundamental aspects of human consciousness: the ability to distinguish between internal mental events and external reality, and the capacity to maintain continuous awareness of one's surroundings. When these basic functions fail, the person becomes a danger both to themselves and to others. Yet even these dramatic symptoms are not the end of the story. As sleep deprivation continues into its 4th and 5th days, the effects become even more severe and begin to affect not just mental function, but basic physiological processes necessary for survival. The body's attempts to cope with chronic sleep loss begin to fail, setting the stage for potentially life-threatening complications. The emotional consequences of sleep deprivation extend far beyond simple irritability or mood swings. When sleep disappears, the intricate neural networks that regulate emotional processing undergo systematic breakdown, creating a state that researchers describe as affective dysregulation, a condition where normal emotional responses become wildly inappropriate and uncontrolled. Dr. Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley has conducted groundbreaking research using functional magnetic resonance imaging to observe how sleep deprivation alters emotional brain circuits. His findings reveal a pattern of changes that helps explain why sleep-deprived people often experience such dramatic mood disturbances. In well-rested individuals, emotional stimuli activate the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, in a measured and appropriate way. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational thought and emotional regulation, maintains strong connections with the amygdala, helping to modulate and control emotional responses. But after just 24 hours of sleep deprivation, this careful balance is disrupted. Dr. Walker found that the amygdala becomes 60% more reactive to negative emotional stimuli, while its connections to the prefrontal cortex weaken dramatically. This creates a situation where the brain's alarm system becomes hyperactive, while the systems designed to regulate it go offline. The result is emotional chaos. Sleep-deprived people show exaggerated responses to minor stressors, interpreting neutral situations as threatening and reacting with anxiety or anger that is completely out of proportion to the actual circumstances. A colleague's casual comment might be perceived as personal attack, a minor inconvenience might trigger overwhelming frustration, or a sad movie scene might provoke uncontrollable crying. This emotional hyperreactivity is not just about negative emotions. Dr. Walker's research has also shown that sleep deprivation can lead to inappropriate positive emotional responses, with people finding things hilariously funny that they would normally consider only mildly amusing, or feeling euphoric in situations where caution would be more appropriate. The breakdown of emotional regulation has serious practical consequences. Sleep-deprived people make poor decisions about relationships, career choices, and financial matters because their ability to assess emotional significance is compromised. They may say things they later regret, make impulsive purchases, or enter into commitments they're not prepared to keep. Dr. Sean Drummond at UC San Diego has found that sleep deprivation particularly impairs the ability to recognize emotional cues in other people. When shown photographs of faces expressing various emotions, sleep-deprived participants were less accurate at identifying sadness, fear, and anger in others. This deficit in emotional perception can lead to social conflicts and misunderstandings. The inability to read emotional cues accurately extends beyond facial expressions to vocal tone, body language, and social context. Sleep-deprived people may miss subtle signs that a conversation partner is becoming uncomfortable, bored, or upset, leading them to continue behaviors that are inappropriate for the social situation. Dr. Lisa Meltzer at National Jewish Health has studied how sleep deprivation affects empathy and social cognition. Her research shows that sleep-deprived people have reduced activity in brain regions associated with theory of mind, the ability to understand and predict other people's thoughts and feelings. This empathy deficit means that sleep-deprived individuals often become more self-centered and less considerate of others. They may interrupt conversations more frequently, show less concern for other people's needs, and have difficulty understanding why their behavior might be hurtful or inappropriate. The emotional effects of sleep deprivation are particularly pronounced in the workplace, where social skills and emotional regulation are crucial for effective collaboration. Dr. Christopher Barnes at the University of Washington has found that sleep-deprived employees are more likely to engage in counterproductive workplace behaviors, including rudeness to co-workers, theft, and sabotage. Sleep-deprived managers show reduced ethical decision-making and are more likely to engage in abusive supervision behaviors. They may publicly criticize employees, make unreasonable demands, or show favoritism in ways that damage team morale and productivity. These behaviors often occur despite the manager's conscious intentions to be fair and professional. The relationship between sleep and emotional regulation is bidirectional. Not only does sleep deprivation cause emotional problems, but emotional stress can also disrupt sleep quality, creating a vicious cycle. People who are anxious, depressed, or dealing with relationship problems often experience poor sleep, which then exacerbates their emotional difficulties. Dr. Alison Harvey at UC Berkeley has developed therapeutic interventions specifically designed to break this sleep-emotion cycle. Her research shows that improving sleep quality can significantly reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression, sometimes as effectively as traditional psychotherapy or medication. The emotional dysregulation caused by sleep deprivation extends to the processing of emotional memories. During normal sleep, particularly during REM sleep, the brain processes emotional experiences from the day, integrating them into long-term memory in a way that reduces their emotional intensity over time. Dr. Elvander Helm at UC Berkeley has found that this emotional memory processing is severely impaired by sleep deprivation. When people are deprived of REM sleep, they retain the full emotional intensity of negative experiences, unable to gain the emotional distance that normally comes with time. This failure of emotional memory processing may contribute to the development of mood disorders in people with chronic sleep problems. Traumatic or highly stressful experiences that would normally become less emotionally charged over time may remain vivid and disturbing, contributing to symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or depression. The hormonal changes associated with sleep deprivation also contribute to emotional dysregulation. Chronic sleep loss leads to elevated levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, which can contribute to anxiety and depression. At the same time, sleep deprivation reduces levels of serotonin and dopamine, neurotransmitters crucial for mood regulation and feelings of well-being. Dr. Robert Stickgold at Harvard Medical School has found that sleep deprivation particularly affects the processing of positive emotions. While negative emotional responses become exaggerated, the ability to experience and appreciate positive emotions is diminished. This creates a bias toward negative mood states that can persist even after adequate sleep is restored. The combination of heightened negative emotions and reduced positive emotions helps explain why chronic sleep deprivation is such a strong risk factor for depression. People who consistently sleep less than 6 hours per night are 5 times more likely to develop major depressive episodes compared to those who sleep 7 to 9 hours. Children and adolescents are particularly vulnerable to the emotional effects of sleep deprivation. Dr. Ronald Dahl at UC Berkeley has found that sleep-deprived teenagers show increased risk-taking behavior, greater emotional volatility, and reduced ability to learn from negative consequences. These effects occur during a critical period of brain development when emotional regulation systems are still maturing. Chronic sleep deprivation during adolescence may have lasting effects on emotional development and mental health that persist into adulthood. The social consequences of sleep deprivation-induced emotional dysregulation can be severe and long-lasting. Relationships may be damaged by inappropriate emotional outbursts, poor judgment, or reduced empathy. Professional opportunities may be lost due to workplace conflicts or poor decision-making. Legal problems may arise from impulsive or aggressive behavior. Perhaps most tragically, the emotional effects of sleep deprivation can become self-perpetuating. People who experience mood problems due to poor sleep may develop anxiety about sleep itself, worrying about the consequences of another poor night's rest. This sleep anxiety can then make it even more difficult to fall asleep, creating a downward spiral of worsening sleep and emotional problems. The emotional devastation caused by chronic sleep loss represents one of the most humanly significant consequences of our modern sleep crisis. While cognitive impairment and physical health problems are serious, the breakdown of emotional regulation strikes at the core of what makes us social beings capable of meaningful relationships and ethical behavior. Understanding these emotional consequences of sleep deprivation provides crucial insight into many of the social problems we face as a society. Road rage, workplace violence, domestic abuse, and countless other forms of antisocial behavior may be partially rooted in the widespread sleep deprivation that characterizes modern life. The good news is that unlike some other consequences of sleep deprivation, emotional regulation typically improves relatively quickly when adequate sleep is restored. People who get a good night's sleep after a period of deprivation often report immediate improvements in mood, patience, and social functioning. However, the speed of this recovery should not obscure the seriousness of the problem. The emotional chaos caused by sleep deprivation can cause lasting damage to relationships and create problems that persist long after sleep quality improves. A single night of poor sleep followed by an inappropriate emotional outburst can end a friendship, damage a marriage, or derail a career. As we continue our exploration of what happens when sleep disappears, we move from the psychological realm into the physical, examining how sleep deprivation affects the body's most basic physiological processes and threatens the very systems that keep us alive. When sleep deprivation extends beyond the acute cognitive and emotional changes we have explored, it begins to affect the fundamental physiological processes that maintain life itself. The cardiovascular system, the intricate network of heart and blood vessels that delivers oxygen and nutrients to every cell in the body, becomes increasingly unstable as sleep loss continues. The relationship between sleep and cardiovascular health was first systematically studied in the 1970s when researchers noticed that heart attacks and strokes occurred more frequently during certain times of day and night. What they discovered was a complex interplay between sleep, circadian rhythms, and cardiovascular function that has profound implications for long-term health. Dr. Francesco Cappuccio at the University of Warwick conducted one of the most comprehensive analyses of this relationship. Examining data from over 1 million people across multiple studies, his findings were striking. People who consistently sleep less than 6 hours per night have a 48% increased risk of developing or dying from coronary heart disease and a 15% increased risk of stroke. These statistics represent more than abstract numbers. They reflect a fundamental disruption in the cardiovascular system's ability to maintain normal function without adequate sleep. The mechanisms underlying this increased risk involve multiple pathways, from acute changes in heart rate and blood pressure to long-term alterations in blood vessel structure and function. During normal sleep, blood pressure typically drops by 10 to 20%, a phenomenon known as nocturnal dipping. This nightly reduction in blood pressure provides a crucial rest period for the cardiovascular system, allowing blood vessels to recover from the stresses of daytime activity and reducing the overall workload on the heart. When sleep is disrupted or insufficient, this nocturnal dipping pattern is impaired. Dr. Kazuo Eguchi at Jichi Medical University in Japan has found that people who do not show normal blood pressure dipping during sleep have significantly higher rates of cardiovascular disease, even when their daytime blood pressure is normal. The absence of nocturnal dipping means that the cardiovascular system never gets the rest it needs to repair and restore itself. Blood vessels remain under constant pressure, leading to accelerated wear and damage that accumulates over time. This process contributes to the development of atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaques in arteries that can eventually lead to heart attacks and strokes. Sleep deprivation also affects heart rate variability, a measure of the subtle changes in timing between heartbeats that reflects the health of the autonomic nervous system. Dr. Mika Tavainen at the University of Eastern Finland has found that even a single night of sleep deprivation reduces heart rate variability, indicating decreased flexibility in cardiovascular regulation. Reduced heart rate variability is associated with increased risk of sudden cardiac death and is considered an early marker of cardiovascular disease. The fact that it can be altered by just one night of poor sleep highlights how quickly sleep loss can begin to affect cardiovascular health. The hormonal changes triggered by sleep deprivation create additional stress on the cardiovascular system. Elevated cortisol levels increase blood pressure and promote inflammation in blood vessels. Increased adrenaline levels cause the heart to work harder and can trigger dangerous heart rhythms in susceptible individuals. Dr. Rachel Laproult at the University of Chicago has documented how sleep restriction affects the entire cascade of hormones that regulate cardiovascular function. Growth hormone secretion, normally concentrated during deep sleep, is dramatically reduced. This hormone plays important roles in maintaining blood vessel health and repairing cardiovascular damage. At the same time, sleep deprivation increases levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. These substances promote the formation of atherosclerotic plaques and make existing plaques more likely to rupture, potentially triggering heart attacks or strokes. The inflammatory changes caused by sleep loss create a state similar to that seen during acute illness or injury. Dr. Michael Irwin at UCLA has shown that losing sleep for even a few nights can trigger inflammatory responses comparable to those seen in people with serious infections. This chronic inflammatory state accelerates the aging of blood vessels and promotes the development of cardiovascular disease. The endothelium, the delicate inner lining of blood vessels, becomes damaged and less able to regulate blood flow and prevent clot formation. Sleep deprivation also affects the body's ability to regulate blood clotting. Dr. Matthew Mead at Harvard Medical School has found that people who are sleep deprived have altered levels of clotting factors in their blood, making them more prone to forming dangerous blood clots that can cause heart attacks, strokes, or pulmonary embolisms. The timing of sleep loss appears to be particularly important for cardiovascular health. Shift workers, who often sleep during daytime hours when their circadian systems are programmed for wakefulness, show especially severe cardiovascular problems. Dr. Eva Schernhammer at Harvard has followed thousands of shift workers over decades and found that those who work rotating night shifts for more than 5 years have a 40% increased risk of coronary heart disease. Female nurses who work night shifts for more than 6 years show increased rates of both heart disease and stroke. The cardiovascular stress of sleep deprivation is compounded by changes in other body systems. The metabolic dysfunction we explored earlier, including insulin resistance and weight gain, creates additional burden on the heart and blood vessels. High blood sugar levels damage blood vessel walls, while increased abdominal fat produces inflammatory substances that further stress the cardiovascular system. The kidneys, which play a crucial role in regulating blood pressure, are also affected by sleep loss. During normal sleep, the kidneys reduce their production of urine, helping to maintain fluid balance and reduce nighttime awakenings. Sleep deprivation disrupts this process, leading to increased urine production and potential dehydration. Dr. McMullen and colleagues at Harvard have found that sleep deprivation affects the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, a complex hormonal network that regulates blood pressure and fluid balance. Disruption of this system contributes to hypertension and places additional stress on the heart. The combination of all these factors creates what cardiologists call a perfect storm for cardiovascular disease. Sleep-deprived individuals face increased inflammation, elevated blood pressure, altered clotting factors, hormonal imbalances, and metabolic dysfunction, all of which accelerate the development of heart disease and stroke. Perhaps most concerning, many of these changes can occur rapidly and may be difficult to reverse. Dr. Viren Summers at the Mayo Clinic has found that even young, healthy individuals show measurable cardiovascular changes after just a few nights of sleep restriction. The sleep debt that accumulates over years of insufficient sleep may create permanent changes in cardiovascular structure and function. While acute sleep deprivation effects can often be reversed with adequate rest, chronic sleep loss may cause irreversible damage to the heart and blood vessels. As sleep deprivation continues, the cardiovascular system is not the only vital network under assault. the brain itself begins to experience changes that go far beyond the cognitive and emotional symptoms we've already explored. At the cellular and molecular level, sleep loss triggers a cascade of events that threaten the very survival of neurons and the connections between them. One of the most critical functions of sleep is the activation of the brain's waste clearance system, known as the glymphatic system. Discovered relatively recently by Dr. Maken Nedergaard at the University of Rochester, this system represents one of the most important breakthroughs in our understanding of why sleep is necessary for brain health. During wakefulness, brain cells are tightly packed together, leaving little space for the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. But during sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, brain cells shrink by up to 60%, creating channels that allow cerebrospinal fluid to flow freely through brain tissue. This fluid flow acts like a washing machine for the brain, carrying away metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. Among the most important of these waste products is beta amyloid, the protein that forms the characteristic plaques found in Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Nedergaard's research has shown that the glymphatic system is most active during sleep and becomes dramatically less efficient when sleep is disrupted. Even a single night of sleep deprivation can reduce glymphatic clearance by up to 60%, allowing toxic proteins to accumulate in brain tissue. The accumulation of beta amyloid and other waste products during sleep deprivation may help explain why chronic sleep loss is associated with increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases. Multiple epidemiological studies have found that people with chronic sleep problems have higher rates of dementia and Alzheimer's disease later in life. Dr. Adam Spearer at Johns Hopkins followed over 123 people for up to 6 years, using brain imaging to measure beta amyloid accumulation. Those who reported poor sleep quality showed significantly more beta amyloid buildup over time, suggesting that inadequate sleep may directly accelerate the pathological processes underlying Alzheimer's disease. The relationship between sleep and neurodegeneration appears to be bidirectional. While sleep loss contributes to the accumulation of toxic proteins, the presence of these proteins in brain tissue can also disrupt sleep quality, creating a vicious cycle that accelerates cognitive decline. Dr. Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley has proposed that this sleep neurodegeneration cycle may be one of the key mechanisms driving age-related cognitive decline. As people get older, they typically experience reductions in deep sleep quality, which leads to increased accumulation of toxic proteins, which further impairs sleep, creating an accelerating spiral of brain dysfunction. The effects of sleep deprivation on brain structure extend beyond protein accumulation to include changes in neural connectivity and brain volume. Dr. Seong-Bong Hong at Samsung Medical Center in South Korea used magnetic resonance imaging to study the brains of people with chronic insomnia and found significant reductions in grey matter volume in regions involved in executive function and emotional regulation. These structural changes appear to reflect actual loss of neurons and synaptic connections rather than simply temporary dysfunction. The brain regions most affected by chronic sleep loss include the prefrontal cortex, which is crucial for decision-making and impulse control, and the hippocampus, which is essential for memory formation. Dr. Elamarie Jaltena at the University of Bordeaux has found that people with chronic insomnia show reduced white matter integrity, indicating damage to the long-range connections that allow different brain regions to communicate effectively. These connectivity changes may help explain why sleep-deprived people often struggle with tasks requiring coordination between multiple brain systems. The molecular mechanisms underlying sleep deprivation-induced brain damage are complex and involve multiple pathways. Chronic sleep loss leads to increased production of stress hormones like cortisol, which can be toxic to neurons at high concentrations. It also reduces production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein essential for neuron survival and growth. Dr. Chiara Sorelli at the University of Wisconsin has found that sleep deprivation alters the expression of thousands of genes in brain tissue, many of them involved in cellular repair, metabolism, and protection against oxidative stress. These changes suggest that sleep loss disrupts fundamental cellular processes necessary for maintaining healthy brain function. The oxidative stress caused by sleep deprivation is particularly damaging to neurons. During normal cellular metabolism, cells produce reactive oxygen species, highly unstable molecules that can damage DNA, proteins, and cell membranes. The brain typically produces antioxidant enzymes during sleep to neutralize these harmful molecules. When sleep is disrupted, antioxidant production decreases while oxidative stress increases, creating conditions that can lead to neuronal death. Dr. Vilma de Cologne at Washington State University has found that even moderate sleep restriction increases markers of oxidative damage in brain tissue. The combination of increased waste accumulation, reduced cellular repair, elevated stress hormones, and oxidative damage creates a toxic environment for neurons. Over time, these factors can lead to irreversible brain damage that manifests as cognitive decline, memory problems, and increased risk of neurodegenerative disease. The developing brain may be particularly vulnerable to the effects of sleep deprivation. Dr. Peter Franken at the University of Lausanne has found that sleep loss during critical periods of brain development can have lasting effects on neural structure and function that persist into adulthood. Sleep plays crucial roles in brain development, including synaptic pruning, myelination of nerve fibers, and the establishment of neural circuits that control behavior and cognition. Disruption of these processes during childhood or adolescence may contribute to learning disabilities, attention problems, and increased risk of psychiatric disorders. The blood-brain barrier, the selective filter that controls what substances can enter brain tissue from the bloodstream, is also affected by sleep deprivation. Dr. Ruth Lydia Stornetta at the University of Virginia has found that chronic sleep loss can make the blood-brain barrier more permeable, potentially allowing toxins and inflammatory substances to enter the brain more easily. This increased permeability may contribute to the neuroinflammation associated with sleep deprivation and could accelerate the development of neurodegenerative conditions. The brain's normally privileged status, protected from many of the substances circulating in the body, becomes compromised when sleep is chronically disrupted. As sleep deprivation extends into multiple days, these cellular and molecular changes begin to manifest as increasingly severe neurological symptoms. The hallucinations and cognitive impairment we explored earlier reflect the accumulation of damage at the microscopic level as neurons struggle to function normally in an increasingly toxic environment. The brain's attempt to compensate for sleep loss by increasing the drive for sleep can also create dangerous situations. The overwhelming urge to sleep that develops after several days of sleep deprivation can override conscious efforts to stay awake, leading to dangerous micro-sleep episodes that can last for minutes rather than seconds. Recovery from the brain changes caused by chronic sleep deprivation may be incomplete. While acute sleep deprivation effects often resolve quickly with adequate rest, the structural and molecular changes associated with chronic sleep loss may persist even after normal sleep patterns are restored. Dr. Sigrid Wiese at the University of Pennsylvania has found that mice subjected to chronic sleep disruption continue to show neuronal loss and cognitive impairment even after being allowed to recover with unlimited sleep for several weeks. This suggests that there may be a point of no return beyond which sleep deprivation causes permanent brain damage. The implications of this research are sobering. The widespread sleep deprivation that characterizes modern society may be creating a generation of people with subtle but persistent brain damage that will become apparent only as they age. The cognitive decline and increased dementia risk associated with poor sleep habits may represent the long-term consequences of years or decades of inadequate rest. Understanding the brain changes caused by sleep deprivation provides crucial insight into the true cost of our sleep-deprived society. While the immediate effects of poor sleep, fatigue, irritability, reduced performance are obvious and temporary, the deeper consequences may be hidden and permanent. The brain, once damaged by chronic sleep loss, may never fully recover its original capacity for learning, memory, and cognitive function. This possibility transforms sleep from a luxury or lifestyle choice into a fundamental requirement for preserving brain health throughout the lifespan. As we approach the most extreme consequences of sleep deprivation, we must consider the possibility that prolonged sleep loss may represent a form of slow-motion brain damage, occurring gradually and imperceptibly but ultimately threatening the cognitive abilities that define human intelligence and consciousness. The The question of whether the effects of chronic sleep deprivation are reversible represents one of the most important and troubling areas of current sleep research. While we once assumed that getting adequate sleep could undo the damage caused by sleep loss, emerging evidence suggests that some consequences may be permanent, fundamentally changing how we think about the importance of sleep for long-term health. Dr. Sigrid Wiese at the University of Pennsylvania has conducted some of the most important research in this area, using animal models to study the effects of chronic sleep disruption over extended periods. Her findings challenge the common belief that sleep debt can always be repaid with adequate rest. In her studies, mice were subjected to sleep schedules similar to those experienced by shift workers or people with chronic insomnia, with sleep disrupted for several hours each day over a period of weeks. After this chronic sleep disruption, the animals were allowed unlimited recovery sleep for several weeks. What Dr. Wiese found was deeply concerning. Even after extensive recovery sleep, the mice continued to show significant neuronal loss in brain regions involved in attention and arousal. Approximately 25% of these neurons had died and could not be restored, no matter how much sleep the animals subsequently received. The lost neurons were primarily located in the locus coeruleus, a brainstem region that produces norepinephrine and plays crucial roles in maintaining alertness and attention. The death of these cells may explain why people with a history of chronic sleep problems often continue to experience attention difficulties even after their sleep improves. Dr. Wiese's research suggests that chronic sleep disruption triggers cellular stress pathways that can lead to programmed cell death or apoptosis in vulnerable neurons. This process appears to be irreversible once it reaches a certain threshold, meaning that the brain damage caused by chronic sleep loss may be permanent. Human studies have provided supporting evidence for the possibility of irreversible sleep deprivation effects. Dr. Torbjörn Ackerstedt at the Karolinska Institute has followed shift workers for decades, tracking changes in their cognitive function and health over time. Even after shift workers retire and return to normal sleep schedules, many continue to show signs of cognitive impairment compared to people who maintained regular sleep patterns throughout their careers. Their reaction times remain slower, their memory formation less efficient, and their ability to sustain attention more limited. These persistent deficits suggest that years of disrupted sleep may cause cumulative damage that cannot be fully reversed. The brain appears to have a limited capacity to recover from chronic sleep loss, beyond which permanent changes occur. Dr. Christian Benedict at Uppsala University has found similar patterns in people with chronic insomnia. Brain imaging studies show that individuals with long-term sleep problems have reduced grey matter volume in multiple brain regions, changes that persist even when sleep quality improves with treatment. The mechanisms underlying this apparent irreversibility involve multiple factors. Chronic sleep loss accelerates the accumulation of toxic proteins like beta-amyloid and tau, which can form stable aggregates that are difficult for the brain's clearance systems to remove. Once these protein deposits reach a critical mass, they may continue to grow and spread even when sleep quality improves. The inflammatory changes triggered by chronic sleep deprivation can also become self-perpetuating. Dr. Michael Irwin at UCLA has found that people with a history of sleep problems show persistent elevation of inflammatory markers even after their sleep improves, suggesting that chronic sleep loss may permanently alter immune function. Epigenetic changes, alterations in gene expression that can be passed down to future generations, may also contribute to the lasting effects of sleep deprivation. Dr. Amita Segal at the University of Pennsylvania has found that chronic sleep disruption can alter the expression of genes involved in circadian rhythms, stress response, and neural development. These epigenetic changes may persist long after the original sleep disruption has ended, continuing to affect cellular function and potentially increasing vulnerability to future sleep problems. This suggests that chronic sleep deprivation may create lasting changes at the most fundamental level of biological organization. The age at which sleep deprivation occurs appears to be crucial for determining whether effects are reversible. Sleep disruption during critical periods of brain development, such as childhood or adolescence, may cause more lasting damage than similar disruption in adulthood. Dr. Marcos Frank at Washington State University has found that sleep deprivation during adolescence, when the brain is undergoing major developmental changes, can have permanent effects on neural connectivity and behavior that persist into adulthood. The adolescent brain appears to be particularly vulnerable to sleep loss, with disruptions during this period potentially altering the trajectory of brain development. The duration and severity of sleep deprivation also influence the likelihood of permanent effects. Acute sleep loss, even if severe, typically resolves completely with adequate recovery sleep. But chronic sleep restriction, even if relatively mild, may accumulate over time to cause irreversible damage. Dr. David Dingyes at the University of Pennsylvania has found that people who consistently sleep 6 hours per night for 2 weeks show cognitive impairment equivalent to those who have been completely sleep deprived for 2 nights. This suggests that chronic partial sleep deprivation can be as damaging as acute total sleep loss. The concept of sleep debt, the idea that lost sleep can be made up by sleeping longer on subsequent nights, may be oversimplified. While some effects of sleep deprivation can indeed be reversed with recovery sleep, others appear to represent permanent changes that accumulate over time. Dr. Hans van Dongen at Washington State University has studied recovery from chronic sleep restriction and found that while some cognitive functions improve rapidly with adequate sleep, others may take weeks or months to return to baseline if they recover at all. The implications of potentially irreversible sleep deprivation effects are profound for both individual health and public policy. If chronic sleep loss can cause permanent brain damage, then sleep becomes not just a lifestyle choice, but a crucial component of lifelong brain health. This research also raises important questions about the sleep habits of modern society. The widespread acceptance of sleep deprivation as a normal part of modern life may be contributing to an epidemic of preventable brain damage that will only become apparent as the current generation ages. The effects may extend beyond individual health to affect future generations. If chronic sleep deprivation causes epigenetic changes that can be inherited, then our current sleep habits may be programming our children and grandchildren for increased vulnerability to sleep problems and their associated health consequences. The possibility that some effects of sleep deprivation are irreversible underscores the importance of prevention. Rather than trying to recover from chronic sleep loss, the focus should be on preventing it from occurring in the first place through better sleep hygiene, workplace policies that protect sleep, and societal recognition of sleep as a fundamental health requirement. However, the research on irreversible effects is still evolving, and there may be interventions that can help restore some of the damage caused by chronic sleep loss. Dr. Matthew Walker has suggested that certain types of sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep, may be especially important for brain recovery, and that techniques to enhance this type of sleep might help reverse some sleep deprivation effects. The field of sleep medicine is also investigating pharmaceutical and behavioral interventions that might protect the brain from the effects of unavoidable sleep disruption. These approaches might be particularly valuable for shift workers, military personnel, and others whose occupations require irregular sleep schedules. As we near the end of our exploration of what happens when humans stop sleeping, we must confront the sobering possibility that the widespread sleep deprivation of modern society may be causing a form of collective brain damage that will have consequences for decades to come. The effects we once thought were temporary and reversible may instead represent permanent changes that accumulate over time, slowly but inexorably degrading the cognitive abilities that define human consciousness. Yet even as we face these troubling possibilities, the research also points toward hope. Understanding the mechanisms by which sleep protects the brain provides new opportunities for intervention and treatment. By recognizing sleep as a fundamental biological necessity rather than a luxury, we can begin to make the changes necessary to protect both individual and societal brain health. The story of what happens when we stop sleeping is ultimately a story about the incredible complexity and fragility of human consciousness. Every night, as we surrender to sleep, we allow our brains to perform miraculous feats of restoration and repair that are essential for maintaining the cognitive abilities we take for granted during waking hours. When sleep fails, this delicate system begins to unravel in predictable and increasingly dangerous ways. From the first night's cognitive impairment to the eventual breakdown of reality testing and the possibility of permanent brain damage, sleep deprivation represents one of the most serious threats to human health and performance. As you listen to these words, settling into comfort and perhaps beginning to feel drowsy, remember that you are about to participate in one of biology's most essential processes. Sleep is not time wasted or productivity lost, but rather the foundation upon which all other human capabilities rest. The research we have explored tonight reveals sleep to be far more than simple rest. It is active restoration, cellular repair, memory consolidation, immune system maintenance, emotional regulation, and toxin clearance, all rolled into a single, elegantly coordinated biological process that has been refined over millions of years of evolution. When we deprive ourselves of sleep, we are not just choosing to feel tired the next day. We are choosing to impair our memory formation, compromise our immune function, destabilize our emotions, disrupt our metabolism, and potentially cause permanent damage to the very organ that makes us who we are. The 21st century has brought us incredible technological advances and unprecedented opportunities, but it has also created a culture that treats sleep as an obstacle to productivity rather than a requirement for optimal function. The artificial lighting that extends our days, the electronic devices that stimulate our minds, the work demands that ignore our circadian rhythms, all of these represent challenges to the sleep systems that evolved under very different conditions. Yet the science is clear. Our biological need for sleep has not changed even if our environment has. We still require the same 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep that our ancestors needed. And when we fail to get that sleep, we pay a price that is far higher than most people realize. The individuals who push themselves to stay awake for days at a time, whether by choice or necessity, serve as extreme examples of what happens when sleep is completely eliminated. But the more common pattern of chronic partial sleep deprivation may be equally dangerous, creating a slow-motion version of the same destructive processes. The shift worker who sleeps 5 hours per night for years, the student who consistently stays up until 2 in the morning, the parent who sacrifices sleep to manage work and family demands, all may be experiencing versions of the same biological breakdown that occurs in more dramatic fashion during total sleep deprivation. The good news embedded within all this sobering research is that sleep remains one of the most modifiable factors affecting human health. Unlike genetic predispositions or environmental toxins, sleep is largely under our control. We can choose to prioritize sleep, create environments that promote good rest, and develop habits that support healthy sleep patterns. The benefits of good sleep extend to every system we have discussed tonight. Adequate sleep strengthens immune function, stabilizes emotions, enhances memory formation, supports cardiovascular health, and may protect against neurodegenerative disease. It is perhaps the single most important thing we can do for our overall health and well-being. As research continues to reveal new aspects of sleep's importance, it becomes increasingly clear that treating sleep problems is not just about helping people feel more rested. It is about preventing cognitive decline, reducing disease risk, improving emotional stability, and preserving the brain function that defines human consciousness. The story of what happens when we stop sleeping is ultimately a testament to the wisdom of biological systems that have evolved over eons to keep us healthy and functional. Sleep represents one of nature's most elegant solutions to the challenge of maintaining complex biological systems in a demanding environment. When we honor our need for sleep, we are not being lazy or unproductive. We are participating in a process that is as essential as breathing or eating, one that allows us to wake each morning with our cognitive abilities restored, our emotions regulated, our immune system strengthened, and our brains cleared of the metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, take comfort in knowing that you are about to embark on a journey that is as important as any waking activity. Your brain will consolidate memories, your immune system will strengthen its defenses, your emotions will find balance, and your body will repair the wear and tear of the day. Sleep well, knowing that in surrendering consciousness you are preserving the very abilities that make consciousness possible. Dream peacefully, understanding that those dreams represent your brain's efforts to process emotions and integrate experiences. Rest deeply, trusting in the ancient wisdom of biological systems that know exactly what they need to do to keep you healthy, happy and fully human. The darkness that surrounds us during sleep is not empty, but full of activity, restoration, and preparation for the new day ahead. In choosing sleep, we choose health. In honouring our need for rest, we honour the complexity and beauty of the biological systems that make our lives possible. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the landscape of sleep deprivation. If you found tonight's exploration valuable, I would be grateful if you could like and subscribe to support more of these gentle scientific adventures. And remember to share in the comments where you are listening from and what strange dreams visit you in the night. Now close your eyes, let your breathing slow, and allow sleep to work its ancient magic. Good night.